All right, we're here with Eamon Lara, and he's an extraordinary drummer, musician, entrepreneur, and we're going to talk about music and practicing and taking lessons. So thank you, Eamon, for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So first, I want to start off with where you grew up and your backstory.
So I'm from Rhode Island on the East Coast. Um, and yeah, just grew up playing with a lot of different bands. Wasn't always a drummer in bands. I was kind of a bass player and a guitarist in a few other bands, and then a keyboardist even though my first instrument was drums. I kind of took a break from it during high school, and yeah, just went to a lot of good, amazing concerts and absorbed a lot of music from my parents and their amazing vinyl collection. And and it wasn't until about 2004 that I got back into jazz. As I saw a few concerts around that. Actually, it might have been 2003. I saw that band Magma at the Knitting Factory in New York. Extraordinary drummer Christian Vander. And then I went to go see the Dave Holland Quintet with Mr. Nate Smith on drums, and those two concerts kind of got me back on the jazz drum track. So that was really important for me, and ever since then, I would say I'm a primary jazz interested drummer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you first get into music? How old were you?
Probably 6 years old. Actually, no, earlier. It was probably around 4 or 5, around then. Yeah, just always listening to music, but then it wasn't until the earliest memory of seeing musicians perform was an Amnesty International concert that my parents had videotaped. And so we used to watch that a lot. And that was my first experience being mesmerized by a drummer. It was Manu Katché on drums, of course. He was a great drummer. And he was playing for Peter Gabriel at the time. And so it was like that and Phil Collins were my first two influences for drumming. So yeah, it was probably around 4 or 5. I got really after watching that video. I was like really inspired, and it wasn't until I was probably 6 that I got my first drum set. But it was like a little toy, kid drum set.
So was drums your first instrument?
It was my first instrument. Yeah, I just had an urge to, bang on my dad's paint cans at a young age. So that was it right there. It's like he would be painting. He had his creative process going on, and I was kind of just listening to his music while banging on his paint cans. And from there, it took off. They're like, okay, let's start giving him buckets and then bongos, and then sooner or later I had a drum set.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you participate in school music programs, symphonic band, concert band, jazz band, marching band, theater? Did you do any of that in high school or junior high school or elementary school?
Yes. Well, first we did recorder was the first instrument we ever played in primary. Like it was like third grade. We learned the recorder, and then after that, actually joined in fourth grade. I was in the school band as a saxophonist. Actually played saxophone for a couple of years. Um, wasn't for me. I couldn't. I didn't like the feeling of the embouchure in my cheeks. It just didn't feel right. wasn't I wasn't meant to be a wind player, so that's why I just quickly dropped that instrument and moved on to the next thing. But yeah, I was in a band in my not normal instrument.
So, growing up, did you have musical influences, and do you have current musical influences? So, in other words, in high school and junior high school, was there things that your parents or your siblings played that inspired you, friends that inspired you to play, or was there certain things like when you got older that you got inspired, certain artists that inspired you?
Yeah, it was odd. There was odd from ever since that video in '86. There was always someone to influence me. In high school, I started listening to, it was all my parents' music. Really, they had it all on vinyl, but then I just kind of got into it again, and I listened to, first I was like really into Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, but then I kind of branched from there and got more into King Crimson and Genesis and stuff with just more odd time drum signatures and but just really good players. I could tell even at a young age what a good drummer was. I knew that early on. So that stuck with me. And then, yeah, and then I got introduced to jazz, and then it's just like, okay, that's the next level naturally for me. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Um, I know that you have said that you were very influenced by Wayne Shorter. I know you talk about that a lot. So he's probably been a big influence. And the other thing that I noticed with you, you've gone to a lot of shows and you've seen
Yes.
a lot of live music, which is a big influence, right?
Right.
So I know those guys are some, some big influence, especially Wayne.
Oh yeah, I must have seen Wayne at least 20 times. I was so blessed to have seen him that many times, and I think the first time was in 2008 at the Newport Jazz Fest, and I was just totally blown back in my seat, and that was the first time I really saw him in person, and I couldn't get enough after that of him, and so yeah, he's probably the biggest guiding light for music for me, as far as all the influences out there of um, living or dead. I'd say it would be him, you know, uh, as a composer and as an improviser, definitely.
Great. So when you graduated high school, did you go into college? And what did you do right after high school as far as a career or music?
So after high school, I did some studying at SIU, Southern Illinois University. Mainly just interested at that time in electronic music, and the early, uh, digital audio workstations at the time. I think it was a Digital Performer was like kind of the first thing that was hot at that time, and so that was my introduction to working with MIDI, and just audio recording and yeah, just having fun and also not having fun troubleshooting. But it was a really good learning experience. So that was really good, and it's definitely carried me to where I am now.
Did you play piano in college? Is that where you started to get more into keyboards?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been really into keyboard synthesizer stuff. Um, yeah, I was really into sequencing and uh, and just a lot of MIDI notation kind of stuff. And even today, I still like I think of that as a separate project that's just like me as a synthesist, you know. So I still compose that way, or on the piano mostly. That's usually my go-to for coming up with a new structure is on the keys.
Awesome. Um, what is your most memorable performance or recording you participated in?
Ah,
Did you play live gigs as you were in Rhode Island and out in the East Coast? Did you play a lot of live shows and?
yes, actually, there was one. The most memorable one was playing at the Middle East. You probably know this place. It's in Boston, in Harvard Square,
Wow.
called the Middle East. They had a upstairs and a downstairs, and we were in the downstairs bigger room actually, um, and it was a great show. I mean, it's funny because we didn't even earn that audience. It was kind of an audience for someone else's like private party, and we just happened to be the house band for that gig before the DJ kind of gets the audience all hyped. Um, so it wasn't the DJ was meant for that audience and not necessarily our music really, but it doesn't matter because we played very well, and there was at least a quarter of that very large audience that was very into what we were doing. And so that was cool because it wasn't really, it wasn't the right setting for us, but it was still a great experience because just the way we came together was really good. Our showmanship was really on point.
And what type of music were you playing?
At the time, we were kind of doing uh, kind of jazz, classical, fusiony, progressive kind of combo, I'd say. Yeah, it was all original material too, so that might have thrown the audience a curveball, but that's what we were. In Rhode Island, I was always very ambitious in all the bands that I was in. We always tried to just not care and just write, just very theatrical music, that had a lot of just a lot of different variations and balance, and that's kind of what I grew up listening to, was just progressive music overall.
So when you grew up in Rhode Island, did you have mentors that guided you? Did you take drum lessons or any kind of lessons growing up? And
No,
did you have mentors musically or otherwise that guided you?
really, it was that one time the only formal training I had in those early days was that one time meeting Nate Smith at for the Dave Holland show, because they broke down the band into different band rooms to discuss their instrument, and so of course I was in the Nate room with Nate, and just got a lot out of that, and it felt like he was talking to me directly at the time. So even though there was maybe 30 of us in this band room, but besides that, it was all just self-reliance. I just self-taught. and I played by ear for so many years, and that's um, what got me by usually up to a point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're living in Rhode Island, um, playing gigs, going to some college. What At what point did you decide you wanted to move to San Francisco Bay Area and then to the South Bay? How did that come about? And how old were you where you were trying to make these transitions?
Let's see. I was probably around. I was 29 at the time, so I had taken many trips out to California since the year of 2000, and just always liked the place. And I guess towards 2008, 2009, 2010, I just I just felt the need that was building to get out of the East Coast. I just kind of needed to leave. It was didn't really like my situation musically or friendship wise. It just wasn't. I didn't feel I belonged in this place. So I just kind of, and I also had some really good jam sessions when I did come visit out here that I wasn't having out there. That I would sometimes with bands, but it was more of this um, spontaneous thing that would just happen. Anyone would just sit down and play. Um, so I used to know these people who lived in this jam house called the Barson House, and that was a jam house for since the 80s probably. And so there was just all these different incarnations of bands that were always there, and that's how I met a lot of musicians at the time. Um, and so I just went for it. I was like, I just need to change the pace and head out here and see what it's like. I just didn't like the cutthroat ways, I guess, of the expectations of what it takes to make it as a musician on the East Coast. So I just kind of wanted to just break free of that and start something else. And who knows what that would change for me. And um, I'm glad I did, actually, even though it's not the ideal setting for music. I'm still, I've learned so much, and the connections that I have made, especially you, has been really life changing.
Did you ever think about going to New York or LA or anything like that when you were moving?
I did.
Did you think about the big? Well, there's Nashville too, but some of the big music towns.
I did. Yeah. And it was just, I think the most overwhelming thing was just how am I going to afford it usually living in an area like that. So that's why I kind of backed off of that. Um, I knew something like that was that extreme wouldn't be right for me. So I was more, you know, considering like the Boston area instead, because it's just a little less hectic, and I'm way more familiar with Boston than I am with New York. So I was considering Boston for a while, but after living out here, I don't think I could live in a place like Boston. As far as quality life, I think it's nicer here. And now, because of Corona days, it might not even matter where you live, as far as, because there's not even a scene anywhere anymore. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So you ended up moving to a beautiful place with redwoods. I mean, I just saw when you're outside, your surrounding. It's pretty beautiful and a lot more holistic.
Yes.
As far as you're a very outdoors type of person. You like hiking, and I think it suited you a little better than being in the city where you're in concrete and
Right.
buildings. So that could get to you if you're not used to it. It's like a different lifestyle. And I
Yeah.
lived in Boston for 5 years, and I really had to get used to the culture shock because it was pretty devastating, to say
Oh man.
the least.
Yeah, I know what you
Well,
mean.
I was in Back Bay, Boston, so it was where Berkeley was, and it was at that time it wasn't. It was pretty run down. They just had a bunch of like what they call like pizzerias and submarine sandwiches. They call them subs.
Oh yeah, the sub shops.
Sub
They call them grinders sometimes.
grinders, right there. Steak and cheese
Oh
and
yeah.
and pizza and greasy pizza, or it was all pretty bad. What we lived on, but that was pretty much what the area was, and then everything else was pretty dirty, and there was a lot of crime and prostitution and all this stuff. When you're a 19-year-old kid, was culture shock, you know.
Yeah.
So great place to learn. And I think Boston was a really great college town because there was a lot of colleges around there too.
Yes.
And there was, I think, 150 colleges in a small city. So we used to really hop around and meet people from all over the world in different colleges. And there's some all girl colleges we'd raid and we used to do all these different things. But that was the cool part of it. But the Bostonians were pretty miserable people, I got to admit.
It's true. I know how that is. Yeah, I know. It's not the most inspiring place as far as people's collective energy.
Yeah. And I think that the humidity it was really intense, and then the cold, and the you have the extreme weather, and you're used to that.
Yeah.
But and I kind of like the winters, even though people would say that's brutal. I enjoyed it because I grew up with not being around snow every day. So, but I remember slipping all the time. I remember the black ice, and I would slip walking. And no matter what you did,
Oh yeah.
you try to be careful. No matter what you did, you'd always hit it, and you'd slide. Oh, and
Black ice. Oh,
yeah, yeah. That
I
would.
don't. Especially when you're driving, that's the scariest part.
Yeah, and so I only drove a little bit. I had a girlfriend at the time. She let me use her car, and so I didn't really experience a lot of driving in snow. And I don't remember times. I remember parking and then the door getting frozen. Like I couldn't. You had to pour hot water on the door lock to get the door open. But I don't remember sliding around driving. I know my friend tells me stories about that, him driving to gigs and hitting black ice and going off the road. And
Yeah, it gets bad, and then you get like stuck by the snow plows. They plow you in. You're just stuck.
oh,
That's
and
happened
your park.
many times in big cities. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I never knew that one.
Yeah, I don't miss any of that.
Yeah. So you moved back here, or you moved over here, and you set up shop, and then you pretty much you started taking lessons, and then did you have a practice routine before you started taking lessons? Did you have a formula? And now that you've taken lessons, do you have a practice routine?
Yes. I did. My practice routine before was really, it really depended on what I needed to learn because I was all oriented by ear, and that's how I learned things. So if it was a beat I needed to learn, I'd learn the beat. If it was a lick I needed to learn, I'd learn the lick. And that's pretty much that's what I would focus on as far as practicing. So, and it wasn't till I went to Cabrillo that I even considered technique or rudiments, because I kind of like was just learning licks till that point, or learning whatever it was, and that's where I really got stumped. I just I got to a point where I was like, oh, okay, this is a whole nother world, and I kind of just went back to teaching myself, and it was a little overwhelming almost at first, even just like the proper way to do a double stroke roll and the stickings. It might not have been taught to me in a way that I could comprehend quick enough or absorb quick enough. But yeah, that was just like a whole nother world that I was aware of. And yeah, so it wasn't till really I had the need to want to learn and take it to another level that I started taking lessons. And that's how I ran into you.
And when you were before you were taking lessons, were you practicing every day? Did you have a routine? Did you practice 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day, 8 hours a day? Did you have any kind of routine that you were working on, or was it more just jamming and kind of when you felt like it?
Well, I even leading up to Cabrillo, I was starting to learn the licks with greater detail, I think, and that's like, oh, okay, I'm hearing a triplet here, so I have to play that right. And so I was even starting to get more fine tuned with all that, and so I feel like I learned a lot of stuff without even knowing what the terms were. And then when I learned them, it was just like, okay, it's for me, it's very much like learning music theory again for the keyboard. It's like, okay, I already know so much, but I have to relearn the terms, and then kind of have to go back to square one to embody it. And that's kind of what it was for me with the drums. So, yeah.
So when you started to seek out lessons, you were how did you start to do that? I know you actually found one of my students.
Yes, and that was it. That was really there. I found one of your students. I think his name was Brian.
Yeah, Brian Fartheit. He's got a German last name. Long.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, and that was really fun. We would just get together. We would, yeah, it was really fun. He would have 2 drum sets set up. It was all the way in San Francisco, and I drove there, and he had a lot of students, and it was just nice to go in there, and we would start off where we would just talk, like have a conversation with 2 practice pads and do whatever it was. If it was alternating flam or just singles, but we would start the conversation while playing. So it was like this multitasking thing where it's just like, hey, so how's your week going? Like, and we're still like keeping the tempo. It was like really interesting how that's how we would start off every time. We would just like, just have that other part of the rhythm, just that part of your brain always working no matter what. And so that was really cool. We started off like that, and then we'd sit down the drum set, and a lot of times we would just start playing. there wasn't really much we would work on, but I think he really liked jamming with me, and we jammed a lot, and that he really liked my playing, and we were able to play off of each other. And he didn't really feel like he wanted to tell me anything, because he didn't. Maybe at the time I wasn't really sure what direction I needed to go in. But I feel like he knew the direction more than I, and that was your direction. He's like, you need to talk to Rob, and that's when I talked to you, because he just felt like you need to. This guy will be right for you. So that was really good.
Okay, so then you had reached out to me, and then we were doing lessons. How do you feel that you benefited from my lesson curriculum, and what areas have helped you the most?
Boy, so much. It's because there's so many different facets of drumming. So I think you're just always bringing awareness. I mean, we have a list that keeps expanding, but there's just always something to be aware of with rhythm. And so I can hear it in my playing, and I can hear it when I practice, that there's a lot more, not just self-confidence, but I'm able to articulate technique now that I didn't have 5 years ago. And even the players that I haven't seen in a while that have come back into my life have noticed that change. There's just, I couldn't do a double stroke roll before, and there's just so many things I'm more aware of now, that there's way less room for relying on just what I know. It's way more than that now. It's opened up so many doors of what to be aware of at all times when playing, whether it be the stroke, or the dynamic, or the tempo, or the actual rhythm itself, or the groove itself. There's just so many things, and so I think that's the biggest part. I can tell all that stuff is really coming through my playing. Yeah.
So would you say you made a transformation since?
Big time.
And you made that first call?
Yeah, and there might have been, 10 years ago, I'm a totally different drummer than 10 years ago. I was more, possibly, looking back, I could see how I was stubbornly self-reliant, and just being like, I just want to learn myself, but only getting to a certain point, building off of strength, and not focusing on weaknesses and things like that. So, yeah.
So it's helped you open your mind up and get through the stubbornness and the closed-mindedness of opening up and expanding your mind.
Yep, that's it right there, because there's always something to learn. So, yeah.
Great. So what are you doing right now? What is your current occupation?
Right now, I'm a gardener. So it's just a lot of digging holes, making raised beds, and stuff like that,
But you're very good with planting and knowing about horticulture and everything. So
Well,
you've got
yeah,
knowledge. It's not like just digging holes. I mean, you know you know a lot. I mean, you've
yeah, no, absolutely.
it kind of ties into the lifestyle in a way.
Yeah, and I didn't have that on the East Coast. You know, as soon as I came out here, it's just nonstop green community horticulture jobs. There's a lot of them, and I've just had a wide spectrum of those kinds of jobs. And but I feel like it tunes into music, you know, and how you compose and how you grow. You're able to let things grow. So I love that process just as much. It's very meditative, just like music. And so I don't really get intimidated like I used to when I used to learn things, because I feel like it's all there's always something to gain. And it is meditative for me. It's like I don't really get caught up in, oh, he's a better player and I should just give up. You know, it's like that doesn't relate to me at all. That for me has always been inspiring when someone can do something masterfully.
Awesome. So, what are your plans for the future?
Really just I can't look too far in the future, but I'm always just refining the present. So really, I would like to be involved musically. Hopefully, we will have concerts and things like that in the future. But that's kind of the direction I want to go in. Is really just not so much be a touring drummer. I do want to play gigs, and I want to play gigs all the time, but I don't want to be a touring band. I want to have room for my garden, or you know, a relationship, or composing and recording too. Like I need space for that too. I don't want to just have the charts and just nonstop be playing out on a tour as work. It has to be a fun, creative, passionate work. But I have to start somewhere, so it's not going to be easy at first.
Yeah, I think that now that things have changed so much, it's that you can do different areas of music without actually leaving your home. And a lot of the interviews I've had with other students, previous students, they're doing electronic music and they're doing producing, and you know, they're doing all kinds of remote recording, and they're doing stuff without even leaving the house. So now more than ever, that's happening. The thing of my day of touring and playing gig to gig and you know, just doing that only, I think is it's changed, and it's there's been a transformation, and I don't think that is going to be. I don't think we're going to go back to that. You know, not for a long time. So
Yeah.
embracing the thing that you did, that I think is rare, is you built an outdoor stage, and
Yes.
you had, you know, it had players come over where it was safe because you're outside, and
Right.
you're
Open
able
air.
to do that, which a lot of people aren't doing. You know, they're just doing stuff through you know, some kind of online recording, or you know, doing virtual jam sessions or virtual recordings, virtual video recordings. So you did a step further where you actually had jam sessions on your porch, or your the stage, which is
Yeah. I mean, if
probably
you figure,
you're the first person I know that has done that. I haven't heard very many. I know some people are doing like things here and there where they're wearing masks and they're kind of playing somewhere where there's no audience, but you're actually, you know, outside, and you know, playing safely, you know, in your own home.
yeah, yeah. I mean, build a big enough stage, then you're all socially distanced. and we really just built a big enough stage for the drum set and the bass player to fit on, and then there's like a separate stage for the keyboardist, and then excuse me. Excuse me. And then the guitarist can just like, be on the ground in a chair or somewhere far away. So that's been working great. And there have been a few places in town that are starting to do kind of that thing where you have like an outdoor venue, and that all the chairs and tables are kind of far apart. So that might be hopefully the direction. If so, I would love to get on that.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Just got to give it some time. But at least you're doing it and you're playing, and I think that's really important. Which others can't. I know I'm just accepting it right now, but I would like to be able to play again at some point. So I'm just being patient. Because there's nothing we can do until we get through it. So.
Yeah, I also feel it feels great because there's so many people out there that have that yearning and need for live music. So with that, I feel it feels nice to be a musician. You have this certain superpower that that people are waiting for. So that I think that's inspiring, and that keeps me going.
Good. So last question, what kind of advice could you give to young musicians that are just starting to get into the music business right now?
Music, okay, like as far as professionally, or like just starting off?
Well, musicians that are starting to get into playing live, and
got you.
And like you did, maybe they're made a move, they graduated, or maybe they're out of college or what have you, and they made a move somewhere. What advice would you give to them? Like you did, you moved somewhere totally new, you got out of your surrounding area or your environment. So what kind of things would you give some kind of advice to them?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very easy to fall into, I'm not living in the right place, and therefore no one's ever going to hear me, or I'm never going to connect with anyone. But I think you just have to put that aside and really just work on your portfolio, work on your own material, work on your chops, your composition skills, and yeah, I like kind of what I just said. It's like there's nothing to be intimidated about ever. It just because no one's going to play like you eventually. You're going to have your own sound. So that's the goal, is to bring something new to the table. And so no one can do that but you. So I think just don't give up on, just have fun with it, I'd say. And don't stop learning. I think that's what I would say. Always make yourself available to learn, and keep reaching, I'd say, no matter what it is. There's always whatever you don't know, and also work on what you play well too. I'd say work on your strengths also, because that's a big part of your own sound, but work on the things you don't know too. Yeah.
That's great advice. Well, Eamon, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, of course.
taking the time out. And let's talk soon. And I'll
Yeah,
probably I'll see you in a couple weeks. And
perfect.
have a
Thank you
great
so
day.
much. Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's been a real big help with my journey with the drums the whole way. So thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, then. Take it easy.
All right, I'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.